Welcome to Things You Don't Know. Today, we're going to be talking about something so ordinary, you almost never think about it until it stops working. Talking about elevators, the machines that quietly decide whether a city grows up or out.
And elevators are a great history of technology story because they're not one invention so much as a long chain of ideas. Hoists, pulleys, safety brakes, hydraulics, electric motors, and then once people trusted them, skyscrapers. I can tell you, friends, as a person with an exceptionality who uses a wheelchair, I couldn't get around most buildings without them.
And it's really strange that a lot of the history uh, isn't really known. You never think about it. I mean, did you think about those things before we started doing this podcast, Dr. Deneen?
I did not. I just thank the Almighty that they were there for the reasons I just mentioned, but you're quite correct. It's a fascinating history.
And Chandler, I imagine you have something to say about it too, huh?
I do. I think elevators are very interesting. And I'd like to start with the part that everybody likes to hide from and nobody likes to admit. They're also a psychology experiment. 10 strangers step into a small little box. They face forward, stop talking, and pretend that the other humans just don't even exist.
I took a course in social psychology, and the professor, very well known, famous guy, assigned a paper. I want you to conduct a brief but good experiment on social dominance. And, at least half of the people did their experiments about who got on the elevator first. I didn't.
Yeah, I know you didn't, Dr. Weaver.
Yeah, where I did mine was at it wasn't really a strip club, but a burlesque club, sort of a strip club where the girls danced and stuff. Yeah,
That
that's a,
reminds me of our time travel podcast.
Yeah, check out our podcast on time funnies to get a little glimpse inside of that story.
Anyhow, getting back to the topic here, elevators aren't just engineering, they're social choreography. But let's earn the ending by starting at the beginning. What counts as an elevator and how far back does the idea go?
At its simplest, ladies and gentlemen, an elevator is vertical transport, lifting people or goods between levels. That predates modern buildings by an awful lot. Think wells, construction hoists, mine lifts, anything that uses rope, pulley, counterweight, windlass, or manpower to move a platform.
To move a platform, right, Chandler?
Absolutely, to move a platform. And basically, an elevator is basically the fancy word for, oh man, we just got tired of carrying all this heavy stuff upstairs.
Yeah.
Now, I'm 6'4" and 245 pounds at least, folks, so I'm very thankful no one has to carry me up the stairs.
Well, now I have to say too, carrying heavy equipment sometimes, especially when you're in school, can be quite challenging.
Mhm.
So it's nice to have that little lift, pun intended, there a little bit.
It certainly is. And in the ancient world, you see sophisticated lifting systems. That's why people in the UK call elevators lifts, used in places where spectacle mattered. One famous example is the legendary Roman Colosseum. Under the arena floor, the Romans used a system of 28 lifts. I'll say that again, folks, 28 lifts to raise animals and props up to the stage level. Dramatic entrances on cue, like ancient special effects thousands of years before George Lucas and Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, but this is a good reminder. Technology grows fastest where there's strong incentive. Moving stone blocks is an incentive. Moving a live animal through a trap door at the exact right moment in front of a roaring crowd, that's also an incentive.
Oh, and I have to say, that's pretty wild. So the elevator reveal predates the shopping mall by about 2,000 years.
Jeez. Chandler, you're right on spot with that. And I found that to be rather interesting too. I knew about the lifts, but I didn't, it really never, it's like, yeah, I didn't really get it until we
Yeah, it puts
started
it into
this.
perspective for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
And it also hints at a key theme. Early vertical lifts existed, but most people didn't ride them. The public's relationship with elevators changes when safety and trust become the central problem.
Okay, so when do we get something like a passenger elevator? Something designed for a person to ride in, not just to lift cargo.
One early, perhaps the most famous example, is at Versailles. In 1743, King Louis XV had what he called a flying chair built. That's an early personal lift, so he could move between floors in the company of various mistresses with some bit of privacy.
Now that's so on brand for royalty. I need vertical transportation for discretion.
Hmm. And psychologically, that tracks. New technology often appears first as a luxury or a specialized tool, something for elites or for unusual settings, long before it becomes a public utility.
You're exactly right, Dr. Weaver, but even in the 1700s, that flying chair still doesn't solve the big modern question. If the rope snaps, do you die? For a long time, the answer was basically yes, that's a serious risk.
See, now this right here is exactly why I'm so grateful that I was born after people decided that falling was just a design flaw.
At least a design flaw, yes. So, what's the problem that changed everything? Well, it's really trust. And let's name the real obstacle. It's not that humans couldn't lift platforms. It's that humans couldn't trust them for everyday passenger use.
That's right, Dr. Weaver, because if I'm stepping into a box suspended by cables, then my brain is going to ask, what in the world is keeping this from turning into a fast lesson in gravity?
Yeah, and as we know, gravity sucks.
Yes, it does.
As with so many other things where a great entrepreneur answers a question, that's where Elisha Graves Otis enters the story. In 1854, he famously demonstrated a safety device at the New York Crystal Palace. He rose on a platform and deliberately had the hoisting rope cut. The safety mechanism prevented the platform from falling and saved his hide.
Indeed, that moment isn't just engineering theater, it's persuasion. It's the first time elevator safety becomes something you can show the public rather than merely claim.
I'd like to think of it as a 19th century viral video. Hey, watch me not die.
Quite correct. And then, crucially, the safety passenger elevator moves from demonstration to everyday life. Otis installed the first safety passenger elevator for public free use in 1857 at E.V. Hogwarts store in New York City.
Here's the cultural shift. Once elevators are safe enough for regular passengers, buildings can get taller without becoming exhausting or exclusive. Stairs impose a tax on height. Elevators cancel that tax.
Yes, they do. So they didn't just change architecture, they also changed who could access upper floors. If you can't climb 6 flights, then stairs quietly decide what opportunities you can reach.
Exactly. And you can see that shift in the growth of elevator equipped office buildings. A notable early example often cited is the Equitable Life Insurance Building in New York, which is described as the first office building to have multiple passenger elevators.
And while we're talking about trust, there's another safety fear that doesn't get poetic treatment because it's too blunt. The open shaft. Even if the cab itself is safe, you still need to guarantee that the outer landing door, that's the door you see from the hallway, can't be opened when the car isn't there.
An important thing to not be able to do. This is where interlocks come in. Elevator safety codes define a hoistway door interlock as a device that A prevents the elevator from running unless the hoistway door is locked, and B prevents the hoistway door from being opened from the landing side unless the car is within the landing zone and stopped or it is being stopped.
So the building is basically saying, no surprise shafts today.
Yes, exactly. It's one of those invisible features you only notice when it fails or when you realize how often you trust it without thinking. Now that safety is on the table, the next question is power. What drives the elevator?
Early industrial lifts used steam power and various mechanical hoisting systems, but a major alternative emerged through hydraulics, using fluid pressure to move a piston and lift a cab. Hydraulic lifting technology advanced around the mid 1800s, and by the early 1870s, hydraulic machines were increasingly replacing steam powered approaches in many settings.
So instead of pull the rope, it becomes pressurized water or oil does the lifting.
Right. Hydraulics are especially effective for heavy loads and shorter rises, but the big leap for tall buildings came with electricity.
Electricity. Indeed, because electric motors scale. They're controllable, efficient, and they don't require the same kind of centralized steam infrastructure.
One cited milestone happened in 1880. Werner von Siemens demonstrated an electric elevator at the Mannheim Felsgau exhibition.
So by 1880, we're basically entering the era of the modern elevator vibe. Motors, controlled motion, and the sense that this can become a normal part of city life.
And then comes traction, the approach most people think of today. Instead of a piston, you've got a motor turning a sheave that's a big pulley with steel cables, with a counterweight balancing the load. The big breakthrough for tall buildings was the gearless traction elevator, pioneered by Otis again in the early 1900s. One engineering history account notes Otis pioneered the gearless traction electric elevator in 1902, with an early installation in New York again in 1904.
And here's the social consequence. Once traction elevators become reliable and fast, the upper floors stop being undesirable. Before elevators, higher floors were often cheaper because climbing was miserable. After elevators, height becomes prestige views, status, penthouses.
Elevators flip the real estate map upside down. Why did we invent different kinds of elevators? Well, because we couldn't just make one elevator to rule them all.
because buildings, budgets, and physics don't agree on one perfect solution. Different elevator types exist because they optimize different trade-offs: height, speed, load, energy use, space, cost, and even how a building is shaped. Start with the big fork, hydraulic versus traction. Hydraulic elevators, piston driven, are often well suited to low and mid rise applications in heavy duty lifting. Traction elevators dominate mid to high rise buildings because they can travel so much farther efficiently.
So, if the building is short and you want a strong lifter, hydraulics can make sense. If it's tall and you need speed and distance, then traction wins.
And psychologically, traction systems helped normalize the idea of smooth, frequent vertical motion, like vertical commuting. Now, I wanted to just say something real quick. I think one of the reasons New York City became a business center and was so popular was dum dum bum the elevator. You know what I'm saying, Dr. Deneen?
I do. It makes it possible for buildings and businesses to expand
Well,
and not.
yes, and then you go up rather than out. You don't spread out all over the place, right, Chandler? You just go up. So you may have an office building with 50 different businesses in it, right?
Absolutely. And I have actually had the pleasure of being in New York City and being in some of those office buildings. And it's like you said, Dr. Weaver, there are all of these offices in one building, all of these businesses in one building, and you can take the elevator up 30, 40, 50 floors sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Then we're looking at geared versus gearless traction. Within traction, you have geared and gearless. Gearless traction reduces mechanical complexity at high speeds and becomes crucial for taller buildings once it matured.
So, in other words, you have fewer things grinding against each other when you're trying to move fast and smoothly.
Yes, yes, that's right. Then there's purpose. Passenger elevators prioritize ride comfort, door safety, and smooth acceleration. Freight elevators prioritize durability, load rating, and often larger doors.
And service elevators are the behind the scenes ones. Staff, supplies, linens, and trash. So the hotel lobby stays calm even when an entire banquet is being set up.
Exactly. Separate elevator classes, quote, are partly about efficiency, but they're also about social design: who shares space with whom and what a building wants to conceal. Now let's talk about dumbwaiters. Dumbwaiters are a cousin technology, the small elevators designed for goods, bringing up food, books, laundry, reducing labor and improving the workflow. The why is simple. You don't need a full passenger cab to move a tray of dishes between floors.
So basically, it's the elevator concept scaled to the job.
Yes, indeedy. Got to tell on myself here just a little bit. Um, back in the day, like seems like 100 years ago, in the music building, we discovered the dumbwaiter that went from the sub basement of the music building all the way up to the department chair's office.
And to be clear, you're talking about the music building at Emory and Henry College, now university, correct?
Yes, indeed. That is
Yes,
exactly
sir.
right. And we found out that it was strong enough, which we were really stupid to try this, by the way, but ride that thing up.
Good
So
Lord.
oh yeah, and we played some practical jokes on people, putting notes uh, in obvious places where they would see it and they would wonder, how the heck did this get here? Or whatever. Anyhow, I know it's really stupid. But anyhow, what about we're talking, some special designs, double deck, inclined, and paternoster. So what about these weirder ones?
Double deck elevators, which are two cars attached one above the other, exist to move more people with fewer shafts, especially in very tall buildings where shaft space is precious.
Because elevator shafts are like vertical real estate. If you use too many of them, the building becomes a stack of empty tubes.
Conversely, inclined elevators exist because some vertical transport problems aren't vertical. Think hillsides, steep urban terrain, or buildings built into slopes. They borrow logic from funiculars while still functioning like elevators.
And paternosters, the continuous loop elevators without doors, they were invented to increase throughput and reduce waitings. But they come with some very obvious safety concerns, which is why they are quite rare if they even exist. I've really not seen any of those myself.
Well, I haven't seen any of them either, Dr. Weaver, but I have seen some videos, and my survival instinct says absolutely not.
That's a reasonable assumption. One modern branch is machine room-less elevators. Instead of dedicating a separate machine room, the motor and control equipment are integrated into the hoistway on top of the shaft, saving space and often improving energy efficiency. A major industry example is KONE's monospace, introduced in 1996.
So the why or the answer to this is because it's more rentable or more usable building space and much simpler installation in some
So
cases.
what you're saying, Chandler, is that with this type of construction, where the motors and everything are right on the shaft, means that there's more space to rent offices and other things and use it.
And in some cases, installation is a whole lot simpler.
Well, yeah, it is because you don't have to run wires, cables, or anything else around. It's right there on the shaft. And
Exactly.
from the user's point of view, it's invisible. The reward is that the building can be designed more flexibly. Should we also mention the type that isn't mechanical? It's behavioral. How elevators decide where to go.
Early elevators often had operators, some in Washington, D.C. for prestige reasons still do. Then automation took over, call buttons, door interlocks, and later computerized group control.
Wow. That's pretty cool, Dr. Deneen. And now you get destination dispatch systems. You type in your chosen floor on a keypad and it assigns you an elevator trying to group passengers headed to similar floors, cutting stops and time.
Which changes elevator etiquette. Instead of pile in anywhere, the building tells you you belong to car C, like you're boarding a train or something.
And that brings us to another quiet evolution, the elevator's voice, which is sometimes literal. Long before modern digital displays, manufacturers experimented with elevators that spoke to passengers. By the mid 1950s, Westinghouse had a phantom voice system, and Otis introduced its EleVoice system, announcing floors and giving guidance through in-car speakers.
So the elevator didn't just learn to move people, it also learned to manage people.
And today, that talking elevator isn't just a novelty. In the USA, accessibility standards require a car position indicator, and indicators that are both visible and audible, and that also have Braille. You can read them in Braille. Elevators must provide an automatic verbal annunciator that announces the floor the car is about to stop at, with limited exceptions for slower elevators, too.
Plus, out in the hallway, elevators often provide audible signals or verbal enunciators indicating the direction up or down. So the people with low or non-existent vision aren't forced to rely on a purely visual lantern light.
So that explains the chimes and the going up to floor 3 voice. It's not just convenience, it is basic access.
Exactamundo. And speaking of access, the buttons themselves.
Modern accessibility rules require tactile and braille designations for car control buttons. Raised characters in braille placed immediately to the left of the corresponding button in the car operating panel.
And when did Braille come into play? In the USA, the major turning point is the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990.
1990.
Yep. And the accessibility design standards that followed. 1991 standards were used for new construction and alterations for many, many years. And the 2010 ADA standards later updated and refined requirements. Those became effective in March of 2012.
So that's why the 5 button has a dot. And may I say, I just wanted to point out that I've noticed that too on other things, such as calculators, phone keypads, and remote controls, that the 5 has a dot on it.
Interesting.
Have you have you noticed that too, Dr. Weaver and Dr. Janine?
I have.
Yes, uh-huh.
Okay. So yeah, so this is why the 5 button has a dot, and also why Braille sits right beside the numbers. It's standardized so that your hands can navigate without having to do all that guessing.
Exactly. And that standardization is doing the same job Otis did with the safety brake, converting anxiety and uncertainty into routine trust.
Well, okay, let's step back. Let's zoom out a little bit here. The elevator is one of the quiet technologies that made modern life possible.
Because without it, tall buildings are basically an athletic contest.
And tall buildings are not just aesthetic, they concentrate jobs, apartments, hospitals, universities, anything. Once elevators become safe and fast, height becomes practical at scale.
There's also accessibility. Elevators are a civil infrastructure tool. They determine whether someone using a wheelchair, someone aging, someone injured, or someone carrying a child can participate in everyday life in a multi-story environment.
And the other side of this is anxiety. Anxiety. Even people who don't think they're afraid of elevators notice it when something goes wrong. A long pause between floors, some kind of a weird vibration, a power flicker. The trust contract gets tested. Now, I have to say, I I'm going to tell on myself here a little bit, Dr. Weaver, kind of. When I was at Emory in buyer's hall. I actually was going up to the third floor and I got stuck in the elevator. The elevator just stopped with me in it.
Okay.
And I guess I'm kind of a weird cat because I didn't freak out or anything. I hit the call button and said, "Hey, the elevator's, kind of stuck here." And it took them about 10 or 15 minutes to fix it. So what did I do? I just sat there and listened to music and just sang. I had me a good old time. It didn't bother me a bit.
Yeah. I guess this is a reason why modern elevator design includes layers of safety, backups to the backup, mechanical brakes, speed governors, door sensors, emergency communication, like you were referring to, Chandler, because the core product isn't emotion, it's confidence.
And part of that confidence is information. The elevator tells you where you are, visually and audibly, because disorientation is its own kind of fear, and because accessible design increasingly treats information as a safety feature, not a luxury.
And part of it is sound design. The ding, the door chime, the elevator voice. Those are all cues that something is working normally.
Which brings us to music. Elevator music, yes. As elevators turned into everyday public rooms, small spaces where people might feel awkward, bored, or nervous, building owners experimented with background music as a kind of emotional soothing. The Muzak brand, for that, tied to the rise of piped background music, traces back to the 1930s, and the company's later marketing explicitly included elevators, music meant to soothe passengers and pass the time back when rides were rougher or slower.
And even if elevator music became a punchline, the underlying idea is serious. We use sound to manage shared space, reduce tension, fill the silence, and keep a rhythm of normalcy.
I was once in an elevator that actually was playing the original season one 1964 theme song from Bewitched. And if you ask me, that is the perfect example of some elevator music right there. I'm
Hmm?
sure you've heard it.
Yeah, yeah.
So the elevator is basically doing three jobs at once: moving bodies, preventing disasters like opening onto an empty shaft, and managing the human experience of being in a small box with strangers.
There's a one-line thesis hiding in there. Elevators are machines that move people vertically and move societies psychologically toward trust, toward accessibility, toward density.
If you want a one sentence history, folks, elevators move from a risky hoist to a trusted public room.
Well, I can tell you this, learning all of this about elevators makes me have a new appreciation for the ding
Ding!
sound. Also, I'm thinking about the Roman Colosseums every time I step into an elevator now, which is a vibe.
A beautiful one, though. If you remember just a few anchor points, ancient lifts existed, Louis XV's flying chair shows early passenger use in 1743.
1743. Can you imagine that? Did you even think that?
I did not. That's 32 years before the American Revolution.
1743. I can't believe that. That's 283 years ago, folks.
That's
Amazing.
wild.
And
Yes.
Otis makes passenger elevators safer and publicly trusted in the 1850s and installs a key early passenger elevator in 1857. Electricity and traction unlock height, and modern types exist because buildings demand different trade-offs.
And next time you're in that small, quiet box with strangers, notice how quickly your mind accepts it. Doors close, motions start. You trust the invisible system, and you follow the unspoken rule to face forward like you're all respectfully observing the wall.
Yeah, it's good to observe the wall, Dr. Weaver, because the wall can be quite inspiring sometimes.
Yeah. Listen, guys, thanks a bunch for listening. Appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Come back for more. Hey, leave a comment with the weirdest elevator you've ever seen. Glass elevators, inclined elevators, old freight cages, anything. We'd love to hear about it. And hey, while you're at it, why don't you click that little subscribe button? We would love to have that. We are going to be in the very near future doing some things that are special for our subscribers. But for now, for Dr. Deneen and Chandler Foster, I'm going to sign off and say bye bye.